Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
All right, great. Our formal topic for today is trade wars and Trump's tariffs. Now, Professor Frankel, you wrote a brilliant article for Project Syndicate back in 2019, and the title of the article was "The Real Cost of Trump's Tariffs." Okay, Professor Frankel, what exactly do you mean by this statement?
Well, let me, before I answer the question about what I meant by tariffs are bad for almost everyone, the Trump tariffs, let me just sort of give my view, and it's really almost all economists' view of tariffs generally. Tariff does create winners and losers. Economists think that there tend to be more losers from the tariff, more winners from free trade. Uh, the losers, there's three effects, three negative economic effects. Let's take the case of Trump's 25% tariffs on steel. One point is that they violate international agreements. They even are not entirely consistent with U.S. law. The excuses he gives, the reasons, national security, well, maybe for steel, but not some of the other things. But the reasons he gives are pretty bogus. Fentanyl, immigration, bilateral trade balances. But presumably, the point is supposed to be that he thinks it'd be good for the U.S. economy. So let me just take that as stipulated. There are three effects a tariff has. Three negative effects. And obviously, other things equal, it helps the sector that's being protected. So steel would pretty much help the owners of steel mills and the workers in steel mills. Negative effects on producers that use steel as an input, let's say auto manufacturers. Steel is used as an input in lots of things, but they have to pay higher prices. Consumers who have to pay higher prices, even if it's an indirect input like steel, they have to pay higher prices for the things that use steel. And then exporters get hurt when we block off imports. How do exporters get hurt? Three ways. When we import less, income among our trading partners goes down, and they import less from us, which is our exports. Number two, the dollar tends to appreciate, to equilibrate, and that partially offsets the effect of the tariff. It would otherwise be a higher price for imported goods. And number three, it hurts our exporters. It hurts our exporters through lowering foreign income, through an appreciation of the dollar, and then the one I did not say is through retaliation, which is the most obvious. Foreigners usually often retaliate, and in the current situation, our trading partners are so used to Trump putting on these tariffs that the retaliation is pretty much automatic. And the tariffs that the U.S. has put into effect over the last 2 months have been retaliated against. All right, now why did I say it hurts almost everybody? If you put tariffs on almost everything, and the current Trump tariffs that are proposed are similar to the infamous Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930, and in that respect, and the 1930 tariff, by the way, did have harmful effects over all three channels that I mentioned, reduced our exports as well as our imports. If you have a tariff on just one product like steel, I said it probably benefits the steel industry, at least in the short run, and they tend to lose competitiveness over time, so it's not clear it's in their interest in the long run. But Trump tariffs, like the Smoot-Hawley tariff, is on everything. And we're all consumers, so even steel workers have to pay higher prices for automobiles and consumer electronics, computers, and clothing, and food, and wine, and wood products, and everything. We're putting tariffs on everything. So even for those workers and sectors that might benefit from one of the tariffs, if it's generalized and falls on all goods, pretty much everybody tends to lose. Trump claims that the tariffs the cost of the tariffs are borne by the foreign producer, that they'll just eat the tariff in terms of lower profits. But in theory, at least some of it should be passed through to American consumers and American importers. And in practice, that's exactly what's happened with Trump's tariffs so far. They've been passed through virtually one-to-one into higher prices for American firms or American consumers that are buying the import.
So,
I mean, yeah.
yeah, go ahead. A major loser, if you will, the average consumer.
Losers, yes, and exporters are the major losers.
Okay.
But that, like I said, we're all consumers, so that sort of comes around. Let me say that Trump was elected. The election wasn't especially close. It wasn't a landslide, like he says, but it wasn't especially close. And it was part of his platform that he put up a lot of these tariffs. Now, I don't think he did say in the campaign anything about putting up high tariffs against Canada and Mexico, and thereby ripping up the USMCA, which he himself had negotiated in his first term, and which he called the best trade agreement his world has ever known, essentially. The negative effects, besides the ones I mentioned, those were effects from a known, settled, finished increase in tariffs. What we've had has been something quite surprising that one might not have predicted from the platform and from the campaign, namely a very chaotic rollout of all kinds of tariffs, where he announces that there's going to be a tariff on a given date, and then the date comes closer and he postpones it, and then he makes other threats, and then he postpones it again, and then maybe retracts some of it and switches to something else. I mean, it's really maximizing chaos, maximizing uncertainty. And so if you're a firm trying to decide whether this is serious and we need to close our factory in the other country and open a factory in the US, that's not a decision that you make lightly. And if it looks like the tariff may be on again, off again, you're going to wait till things settle down before doing it. So this is having a dampening effect on investment and hiring. And we're talking about trade policy, but the policy with regard to firing all these government workers is the same. It's so erratic. It seems to maximize the amount of chaos for a given dollar saved. And for that matter, the foreign policy is again unpredictable and chaotic. I mean, probably the most important difference is that these are just more numerous and higher level. I mean, first term, he wasn't talking about tariffs of 200% on some European products, like he is now. And it's the first time it showed up in prices. If you were buying a washing machine, you had to pay more, but the tariffs weren't so extensive as to show up in the consumer price index in a way that people noticed and drew the direct connection. The tariffs he's talking about now, if he goes ahead with them, are so large, they fall on so many goods, and they're so high that they will have a noticeable effect on the cost of living.
Right.
It's not usually done to use tariffs to achieve non-economic goals like limiting immigration or fentanyl. But Trump believes in an unconventional approach. Not only is most of the fentanyl that's smuggled across the borders brought by American citizens, but very little of that, almost none of it, comes across the Canadian border. So this is really just an excuse, which isn't even as credible as national security excuse or whatever. And many of the demands he's making or seems to be making are not ones that other countries can grant. If fentanyl is not coming across the border to begin with, you can't make less of it come across the border. And he talks a lot about the bilateral trade deficits with other various countries, but that's not in the control of other countries. So they're genuinely puzzled as to what it is he wants or what it is they're supposed to do. Except by now they're probably just sort of reconciled to just kind of weary about it. Well, I guess we just have to match quid pro quo. Every tariff they put against us will have to reciprocate with a tariff against Americans until they see the folly of their ways. Well, it was, and I'm not sure we appreciated it well enough at the time. It was all the economic variables that you want to be up were up, like employment, GDP growth, uh, everything you wanted to be down was down, budget deficit down. In fact, he converted it into a budget surplus in his second term, and inflation and everything was really, even crime was down. Everything was pretty much going the right way. Um, you mentioned this striking fact that 10 out of the last 11 recessions, all the recessions since World War II, have been under Republican administrations. I do think that Democrats have, on average, overall, had better economic policies than Republicans, but even I am at a loss to explain how it can be 10 out of 11. And 5 out of the last 5, by the way, were under Republicans. The chance of this happening just by chance, the probability is 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. It's 1 out of 100 for the 10 out of the last 11. The related fact is every time since World War II that there's been a change of party, not just a change of president, but a change of party in the White House, the growth rate has fallen. If it's a switch from Democrats to from Republicans to Democrats, it's risen. If it's from Democrats to Republicans, it's fallen, and that's quite remarkable. Among the Democrat presidents, only one out of the 16 quarters of their term in office, on average, has been a recession quarter, whereas 4 out of the 16 have been for Republicans. I'm at a loss to explain this. Yes, I think Clinton overall had good policies. I think he had good trade policy. I think he had good fiscal policy, pretty good regulatory policies. But even I have a hard time explaining why there's been this consistent pattern. Three trade agreements under Clinton. He signed NAFTA. He saw the end of the negotiations under what's called the GATT, the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, and to the Uruguay round, and the foundation of the WTO, World Trade Organization. And there were the change in arrangements that brought China more fully into the world economy. It used to be the U.S. would have to pass what's called most favored nation status every year, and they made that permanent rather than having to renew it every year. Now those things today are not very popular, and it's true that the bringing China into the global trading system did not noticeably move them in the direction of democracy or human rights. But I think they were beneficial policies for the U.S. During Clinton's campaign, there was a lot of talk about strategic trade policy, but I think his trade policy was pretty much in line with. It wasn't a return to mercantilism, which you could interpret Trump as, but it also wasn't particularly strategic in the sense that strategic trade theory, which was developed in the 80s, said that yes, in certain very special circumstances, if one country protects its airplane manufacturer, for example, an airplane's monopoly or duopoly, that they can reap more profits for the domestic company. But if everybody does it, both countries do it, the Europeans subsidize Airbus and we subsidize Boeing, then you're worse off. And so the new trade, so-called new trade theory of the 80s and the strategic trade policy still said that a world in which everybody refrains from intervening is better than a world in which everybody intervenes. And so in that sense, these trade agreements that Clinton negotiated and enacted, and many more others, were in the traditional pattern of thinking that if everybody lowers their interventions, then everybody is better off. It wasn't just trade policy. I think his fiscal policy was right, which is as the recovery from the 1990 recession reached its culmination, we're back to full employment. He gradually slowed the rate of growth of government spending and raise some tax revenue, with the result that what had been fiscal deficits at the beginning of the decade turned into surpluses by the end of the decade, as I mentioned. And he did it without any Republican votes, although I give some credit to the first President Bush, for some of the changes he made before he was voted out of office.
Okay.
When he went back on his no new taxes pledge, and that in the recession, or presumably why he didn't get a second term. But I think he did help lay the foundation for this path that Clinton pursued through the end of the decade, which was the slower rate of growth of spending and higher rate of growth of tax revenue. I think they both did a good job under very difficult circumstances. I mean, to begin with, let me say that if at the beginning of the year, if you had said, what could Trump do that's so outrageous that he couldn't possibly do it, it'd be hard to think of things, but asserting territorial claims against Canada would be one of the things that people would have thought you were joking. And the Canadians, of course, were outraged. They thought he was joking at first, but because it's so outlandish, similar to taking over Greenland and some of the other things that Trump has talked about, turning Gaza into a seaside resort. But the Canadians eventually realized he seemed to be serious because he kept saying it, and they responded pretty strongly, immediately reciprocating the tariffs, 25% tariffs back again. And of course, Clinton put them on and then rescinded them. And I think the Canadians have left their retaliation in place since Trump says he'll put them back on again. April 2nd is supposed to be the date when all these tariffs go into effect. And so Canadians I believe, have left it at 25%. And if we do more, they'll retaliate more. And the other trading partners will too. Mexico held back a little. She wasn't as assertive as Carney. I think she played a role very, very well, and prepared to retaliate 25%, but in such a non-confrontational way that Trump actually says now he likes her. She must have said something to flatter his ego, because he's a sucker for that.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much, because we haven't previously discussed this question. Thank you perfectly. Frank, as you wanted to be, please go ahead. Thank you.
So we all find so much of what Trump does as unprecedented, and it's not exaggeration. So much of it is unprecedented. But in the search for precedents, Richard Nixon does indeed come up as a possible candidate. He broke the law, as Trump has repeatedly. Nixon tried to hide the fact that he had broken the law. And when he got caught and when the judges ruled against him, he resigned. Whereas Trump doesn't hide what he's doing. I mean, he may say it's in the American interest or come up with some rationalization, but he doesn't hide what he's doing, and he's not on a path to obey the rulings of the judges, the judicial branch, which is one of the things that's most alarming, more alarming than the economic implications of his policies. But to challenge the separation of powers and to put the executive branch, the presidency, above the legislative and judicial branches is an assault on 250 years of U.S. history and on the Constitution, and among other assaults, and is quite alarming. On economic policy, Nixon was a Republican. Republicans are supposed to be in favor of usually free trade and monetary and fiscal discipline. Nixon, like Trump, deviated from all three of those. He ran big deficits to continue fighting the war in Vietnam. He pressured the Federal Reserve for easier monetary policy in a very strong way. He put on wage price controls, which is a pretty high level of intervention in the economy that other presidents have not done. That was to suppress inflation. So you lower interest rates and you have the Fed print a lot of money. that causes growth to rise before the next election. And you put off the inflationary impacts with wage price controls just to keep the lid on the pot before it boils over. He took the dollar off of gold. He put a 10% tariff on all imports. So those are all pretty highly interventionist things, and I would say we're negative, harmful things.
Okay.
And they do have strong parallels with what Trump is doing.
That does have strong parallels. Great. We are moving now to your concluding remarks. Please feel free to say a few words to our audience here in California and to the rest of the country. Your concluding remarks now about how you feel about all this. Maybe you want to talk about, I don't know, something else, birds, but you can talk about the economy certainly.
Well, it's all quite alarming. I think the general chaos in policy, and in particular policy in the trade area and spending area, is raising the chance of recession needlessly. We're both going to have higher inflation as a result of the tariffs, and perhaps as a result of if he gets the easier monetary policy once, that'll cause inflation. But we're also going to have slower growth, not just because of the negative effects of these policies themselves, but because of the uncertainty it creates, the general chaos that accompanies the policies. But what worries me more than the negative economic effects, because we can survive that, we can get past that. But the two things that worry me the most are foreign policy, where he could do really serious damage. He's doing the opposite of standing up to Putin. I mean, Prime Minister Chamberlain of Britain at Munich did not tell Hitler, sure, invade however many countries you want. He just foolishly believed that Hitler would settle for Czechoslovakia and not go after others. But he didn't invite him to invade other countries, whereas Trump has practically done that with Putin. And the other area that I'm truly alarmed is as I mentioned, that the putting aside 250 years of U.S. history and respect for the Constitution and respect for the separation of powers and respect for freedom of speech and freedom of lawyers to represent who they want to represent and who wants them, and so on down the list. It's really quite alarming. Not something we've seen in the U.S. before. And there's some who say that we may not have another democratic, free and fair election if the system is as severely bent as Trump seems intent on doing.
What is the light at the end of the tunnel?
Europeans appear to be maybe rising to the challenge.
Yes.
It's true that they haven't had to think about defense very much because we've been doing it for all these years.
Perfect. Yes.
And so if Europe plays a larger role in the world economy, I think that, and the world governance, not just economic, and I think that would be a good thing. The world has benefited, everybody, including the U.S., but other countries as well, I think has benefited from U.S. leadership in the post-World War II area, developing multilateral institutions and multilateral policies, international rules that you abide by when it comes to trade or other things, collective defense. I think we've made a lot of mistakes in the past, but on net, it's been good for the world. I think it's maybe inevitable that has run its course, and it's surprising that the U.S. doesn't want to exercise global leadership anymore. We're giving up voluntarily all the means we had of influencing what goes on in the world. But maybe if you want to look for a silver lining or a light at the end of the tunnel, it's that a system in which other countries, particularly our allies, or what we used to call our allies, step up, play a larger role.
Absolutely.
That could be a good thing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for this great interview.